When country music icon Carrie Underwood appeared on Asterisk, Live Tonight with Melanie Hayes Asterisk, no one could have predicted how intense the ensuing discussion would be. It was a chilly November evening, and the studio audience was buzzing with anticipation as they waited for their favorite star to take the stage. The lights dimmed and Carrie took the stage, her smile brightening despite the nerves she tried to hide. She'd been on countless talk shows before, but there was something different about this one. Maybe it was the fact that Melanie's eyes sparkled with a peculiar sharpness, or maybe it was the weight of expectation that came over Carrie like a heavy blanket. The host, Melanie Hayes, was known for her witty banter and her ability to get celebrities to open up in ways they hadn't planned. But tonight there was something different in the air, a tension that even the most casual viewer could sense. As Carrie took her seat, the camera swept across the auditorium, capturing the wide-eyed eyes of fans who had been waiting months for tickets to this show. They clapped and cheered, but Carrie hardly noticed their enthusiasm. Her mind was already racing ahead, wondering what questions Melanie had in store for her. Melanie wasted no time. "Carrie, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here today. You've had such an incredible career, and we know your fans are dying to hear all about your latest album. But first, I want to ask you something a little more personal." Carrie's heart raced. Personal? Normally interviews like this weren't conducted. She forced herself to smile, trying to keep her composure. "Of course, Melanie. What's on your mind?" "Well," Melanie began, leaning forward slightly, a contrived sincerity in her voice. "I think everyone already knows you're a devout Christian, right? And your faith is a huge part of your life. So I'm curious, how do you reconcile that with some of the things you sing about? I mean, your songs are full of heartache, revenge, and sometimes even, well, let's just say, not exactly wholesome content." The question hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment Carrie felt the room spinning. Sure, she'd faced criticism before, but never like this. Melanie's tone wasn't accusatory, but it was calculated to make Carrie feel like she was backed into a corner, like she had to choose between defending her faith and her art. Carrie could feel the stares of the audience waiting for her answer. She could almost hear the murmurs of the home audience who were expecting an easy conversation, but now witnessed something much more tense. For a second, Carrie hesitated. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, and her fingers twitched nervously in her lap. She wanted to lash out at Melanie, to tell her that it wasn't fair, that she shouldn't have to justify her choices to anyone. But then she took a deep breath, reminding herself that she always believed in standing firm on her values, no matter the pressure. "Melanie," she began slowly, choosing her words carefully. "You're right. My faith is incredibly important to me. It is the core of who I am, and it guides every decision I make. But I also believe that my music tells stories. Stories about real people, real emotions, and real struggles. Sometimes, those stories aren't pretty, and that's okay. Life isn't always pretty either." Her voice trembled slightly, but there was a power in her words that took Melanie by surprise. The host blinked, clearly not expecting such a measured response. Carrie continued, her conviction growing stronger with each sentence. "I don't think my faith and my music are at odds with each other. In fact, I think they complement each other. My songs may talk about heartache or anger, but they also talk about hope, forgiveness, and healing. These themes are deeply rooted in my faith. I write about the human experience, the good, the bad, and everything in between, because that's what brings people together. That's what makes music powerful." There was a pause while Melanie comprehended what Carrie had said. The audience, too, seemed to hold its breath, waiting to hear what the host would say. For a moment, it seemed that Melanie might try to fight back, to delve deeper into the controversy she hoped to stir up. But instead she nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You know, Carrie, that's a very beautiful way of looking at things," Melanie admitted, her tone softening. "And I think a lot of viewers would appreciate hearing that perspective." But the conversation didn't end there. As the interview continued, Melanie asked increasingly pointed questions about Carrie's personal life, her relationships, and her views on controversial topics. Each time, Carrie answered with grace and intelligence, not wanting to be drawn into the sensationalism that often dominates celebrity interviews. She spoke from the heart, sharing her thoughts with vulnerability and honesty, even if it meant admitting that she didn't have all the answers. By the time the interview was over, the atmosphere in the studio had changed dramatically. What began as a potentially contentious exchange turned into a thoughtful, sincere conversation that inspired both viewers and viewers at home. Carrie's poise and authenticity won them over, And soon clips of the interview began circulating on social media, sparking a national discussion about respect, honesty, and the importance of staying true to oneself. In the days that followed, Carrie received countless messages from fans and fellow artists praising her for the way she handled the situation. Some thanked her for giving them the courage to speak out about their beliefs, while others simply expressed admiration for her unwavering commitment to her values. For Carrie, however, the real reward was the realization that she had stayed true to herself even in the face of adversity. Reflecting on the interview later that evening, sitting alone in her hotel room, Carrie couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when she doubted herself. But in the end, she had stood up for herself. She showed the world that it was possible to be both a successful artist and a person of faith without compromising either. And looking out the window at the twinkling lights of the city below, Carrie realized one important thing. To stay true to yourself is not just to stand up for your beliefs, but to live them every day, in every choice you make, in every word you say. It means being authentic, even when the world is trying to pull you apart. Thinking about it, Carrie smiled quietly to herself, feeling that she had regained her purpose. She knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but she also knew that if she stayed true to herself, she would be able to overcome any difficulties. After all, that was what mattered most in the end. Several weeks had passed since the interview had aired, but the repercussions of that night still hung in the air. Carrie was back to her normal routine of writing songs, practicing for upcoming concerts, and spending time with her family. But the memories of that conversation with Melanie Hayes lingered in her mind. From time to time, she caught herself thinking about it, replaying in her mind the moments when she felt most vulnerable, most open, and yet most powerful. She has always prided herself on her sincerity, on the fact that her music reflects the complexities of life. But this interview pushed her to a new level of transparency. It forced her to confront the tension between her public persona and her private self. And as a result, she has a newfound appreciation for the power of authenticity. One evening, as Carrie sat at the piano working on a new song, she reflected on the lyrics she had written earlier that day. They were raw, emotional, and candid. Exactly what she had been striving for since that fateful night at the Live Tonight show. But as she listened to the tune, something didn't seem quite right. The words were there, but the emotion they evoked seemed empty, lacking the depth she was striving for. Frustrated, Carrie slammed down on the keys and a dissonant chord rang through the room. She sighed heavily, leaning her forehead against the cool surface of the piano. Why was this so difficult? Why couldn't she convey the same intensity, the same passion as she had during the interview? At that moment, the phone on a nearby table buzzed, distracting her from her musings. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from one of her close friends, a fellow musician who had watched the interview and asked for her support. The text was simple but sincere. "You've been great, Carrie. Stay strong." Tears came to Carrie's eyes as she read those words, realizing how much that night had meant, not only to her, but to so many others who had been touched by her candor. In that moment, she realized why the song wasn't working out the way she wanted it to. She should not have forced her emotions, but let them flow naturally, as they had during the interview. Taking a deep breath, Carrie brushed away her tears and returned to the piano. This time, instead of focusing on the technical aspects of the song, she let herself feel the full weight of her emotions. She thought about the pressure she had faced, the doubts that had crept into her mind, and the strength she had found in herself to rise above it all. Slowly but surely the words began to take shape, the melody falling into place with a sense of ease she hadn't experienced in weeks. As Carrie played, she felt the energy in the room change, and the music enveloped her in a cocoon of warmth and comfort. The universe itself seemed to recognize the truth of her words and validate the journey she was on. And when she finally finished the song, Carrie sat, exhausted but content, realizing she had created something truly special. The next morning, Carrie shared the new song with her friend, who immediately called her, his voice full of delight. "Carrie, this is incredible. You've really captured something. It's like you're speaking directly to anyone who has ever felt the disconnect between who they are and what the world expects them to be." Carrie smiled, her heart ached with gratitude. "Thank you. I guess sometimes you just have to trust yourself and let your emotions lead you." In the weeks that followed, the song became a hit, resonating with listeners around the world. People embraced its message of staying true to oneself, finding strength in vulnerability and embracing the messy, imperfect beauty of life. And for Carrie, that has become the greatest reward of all. As she toured the country and performed the song night after night, she saw the impact it had on her fans. They sang along with tears in their eyes, their voices shaking with the weight of their own struggles and triumphs. And in those moments, Carrie realized that she had done something much more important than just write a catchy tune. She had created a space where people could feel seen, heard, and understood. Reflecting back on the interview with Melanie Hayes, Carrie realized that it was a turning point in her career, but more importantly, in her life. It taught her to value authenticity, to stand firm on her values, and to believe in herself even when it seems like the world is going to knock you down. And every night when she took the stage to share her music with the world, Carrie did so with a renewed sense of purpose. For she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always stay true to herself. And that was more important than anything else.